All right. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Minnesota. It's rainy and a little bit warm here, but I'm really happy to see you all today. Let's not ignore an elephant in the room. There's war in our country, and all the technologies are really effective and great when we use them, both in peacetime and in wartime. However, we should take care of ourselves and our students. So if we want to help our students develop resilience and overcome the impact of traumatic events, we have to be informed about the trauma teaching English to young learners, and we have to take that information to our attention and use it effectively. So today we're going to explore the idea of trauma-informed English language teaching technology in primary school, and we will focus on basic principles and effective approaches to trauma-informed learning. Right. So, so first, let's define what trauma is. This is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, natural disaster, and etc. Many scientists and psychologists say that according to trauma-informed learning, any person has their own experience of trauma. And it's not necessarily have to be some event like an accident, natural disaster, or war. Even a loss of a favorite pet can become a trauma for a child. And that is why, according to trauma-informed learning, we have to adapt the educational process towards the needs of the participants of that process. And immediately after the tragic event, there's shock, denial, and these are typical reactions. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, some flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. The development of children and adolescents who have been exposed to trauma compared to those who haven't is different. You can see this on the slide. Children and adolescents without traumatic exposure can achieve survival and emotional behavioral control, allowing them to flourish and succeed socially, emotionally, and cognitively. However, children and adolescents exposed to trauma find it challenging to achieve at school due to their heightened state of arousal and real or perceived concerns about their safety and security. And that is why knowing what trauma is and how it influences participants of educational process, we can implement trauma-informed practices. And the next thing I wanted to discuss with you is what makes trauma a trauma. So first, there should be events that influenced a person. However, not all events become trauma. For one person, things can become trauma, and for other person, it will not become trauma. So what's important is the experience of people, experience of a person, and the real outcomes that are in the form of those reactions and feelings of the person. So what makes a trauma? Trauma is that experience and how we perceive something going on around us. And now I have got a question about the following. Do you have any children with unexpected reactions in your classrooms? And most probably it started around February or maybe 8 years before that. So do you have any children with unexpected reactions in your classrooms? Put 1 in the chat box, please. Okay, check in the chat box. So if you have children with unexpected reactions, please put 1 in the chat box. All right, thank you. You can see first answers. Yes, exactly. So we are a little bit psychologists, so we can predict that there might be something around trauma in their life. However, we need to engage psychologists and a larger community to identify the reasons. However, while we think about involving others and this community outreach, we still have to deal with these children on everyday basis in our classrooms. And we should be aware of what becomes a common trigger for them and how to deal with that. So one of the most common triggers are perceived loss of control, anxiety around changes in students' routines, fear of disappointing or upsetting others, especially those important adults in their life or important circle of their care. And also unexpected events, sound, sights, and activities that might trigger trauma-exposed children. And there are several principles we can implement to make our classrooms trauma-informed. The first principle is to create a safe environment, then to build relationships with the students and caregivers and wider community, and respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion, supportive teaching practices, and the sense of community. Now let's have a look at these principles in more details. So by creating a safe environment, we mean cyber security if you teach online, and classroom security if you teach offline. If we're talking about online, so make sure that you discuss all the things related to using cameras with students. For some of them, it might be a very good thing to turn on the camera if they have quite powerful, quite good connection with the internet. And also, if they feel like they don't want to show their homework environment, that might be a good idea not to turn on the camera. It's also a good idea to discuss expectations regarding the screenshots, virtual backgrounds with your students. So make it a rule of thumb that students do not take screenshots, because photos of other participants of events might be there on the screenshot, and then if that screenshot becomes viral and shares between students or in different chats, then the faces, names, and some personal information of other people might be exposed to other people, to strangers, and that might give this insecure moment to your classroom. So you should ask for permission to take screenshots and to record videos and things like this. Next, you should discuss the meeting codes, passwords for your online meetings, and also you should enable waiting rooms as we have now, so that you can double check who's participating in your meeting. And also you should discuss the appropriate and inappropriate names of students. And also that might be a very good idea to show students how to change names, for example, in Zoom or in Google Meet, so that everyone knows their real names and they do not trigger others by some names or mocking expressions. Then the next thing is classroom security if you're in brick and mortar classroom. So it's a good idea to have calm down areas in your classroom. If you see that the person is anxious or triggered by something, you can ask that student to go and spend several minutes in the calm down areas. That area can be some cozy corner in your classroom where a child can see some book, some comic book, or can eat a candy or maybe some piece of fruit, and by changing the environment and changing something that is around them, they can calm down. And also the next thing is, and it's also really important, is discussing where the shelter is and giving clear instructions and explaining your expectations regarding what we do if there's air raid siren, and how we spend our time in shelters, and how we follow instructions and communicate with each other. So this is the first principle, creating a safe environment. The next principle is build relationships. And by building relationships, we're talking about building this confidence that students are respected and valued in our community. And we can start with asking questions, not for the sake of asking questions, but more of an interest to the life of our students. And also we can have small talks before classes and after the class. So joining online session several minutes before the class is a good idea to reinforce those small talks. Next, you should be sincerely interested in the life and events going on in all around students. So you can discuss some things of an interest for a student. You can also be interested in the students' feelings, emotions, and news in their life. Also empower students by choices. Of course, you've got a lesson plan, and it's your top priority to follow your lesson plan. But within this lesson plan, you can give some slots where students choose what they do first and then next, or they choose an activity they want to work on now, or they might also choose the level of difficulty they want to work on. So giving these slots for choices empowers students and shows that they have something in control in this classroom. And this is very important in trauma-informed learning, to show that students have control. And also work in breakout rooms if you are working online, or work in groups if you are working offline. So by working in breakout rooms, you stimulate communication of students, and by expressing everything they want to say to others, they feel less anxious and less frustrated. And in this way, you also implement trauma-informed learning. And also a very important thing within building relationships principle is reaching parents for help and for advice. You've got your degree in education, and you are a professional in your area, and sometimes parents might need this guiding, helping hand to help explain what's going on around their child and your students, and discussing these things might be a very good idea, and it might also show that you do care about their well-being. Then the next principle is respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So first, I would suggest respecting homework environment of your students. Some students might zoom in your lessons from really unexpected homework environments because they are in a dangerous place or relatively dangerous place, or they do not feel secure staying where their working space is because, for example, it's next to a window. And also they might appear on your screen, probably from the kitchen, and then someone else goes on the background. So do respect that, and allow your students to turn off the cameras for the moment, or show them how to change the virtual background or how to blur the background of the meeting. Then the next thing is calibrate workload thoughtfully. We are consistently talking about that both at schools, at the ministry level, at the universities, but at the same time, in the parents' chats, we can read that the workload is still heavy and it's extremely difficult for our students to stay on the top of things. So that is why calibrating workload might be a very good idea. And it will also work if you discuss it priorly with the parents and students. Ask them what workload is good for them, how much time they can spend on their homeworks, what level of difficulty is good for them. And then openly explain them what track they are on, if they will reach their goals soon or a little bit later if they choose this kind of workload. And if your students agree with that, so why not? So by calibrating workload, you also create this caring environment about your students, and also you're trauma-informed. The next advice I would give is to use universal design in handouts. For some of you, universal design might be a really new idea. So universal design is about creating the space that is accessible, inclusive, and usable. So if you're working online, that's a very good idea to use captions. For example, in Zoom, there are those captions, and when you speak, those captions appear. So for those who do not have microphone and headphones, they might just read those captions. For Google Meet, there's also this Google Meet for Education. There's also this feature in some of the settings, so have a look at it. If you're working with presentations, so don't add those very bright colors, because they might trigger some of your students. And also some of them use their mobile phones. So if there is, for example, black text on, I don't know, orange background, that might be not super comfy for their eyes, especially on their mobile phones. So think about these things, and also omit animations, because when connection is poor, those animations do not look good, and some students might not see some parts of text because of animations and poor internet connection. Also, do not cover only, let's say, presentations in your classroom, but also there might be some handout that you share priorly to the class. And that is a very good idea, that students might see those handouts before the class. And then if they want, they might print those, or they might upload it to different devices so that they can work with several devices at the same time. Okay, so this is about universal design. Next is provide video recordings. Do not be afraid of sharing those videos within the group, because some of the students might have poor internet connection, and they might be shy of saying that they didn't catch something. So giving these video recordings, distributing these between your students is a good idea for them to catch up with material. And if they don't understand something, you can give that video link to them, or you might text them what video to refer to for some extra information they need. So these video recordings might be a very good option for you. But of course, at the same time, talking about these things is important, but you should care about yourself as well. I do know that that you have a very heavy workload. So you also don't have electricity all day long, and you might have poor internet connection. So discuss that with your students, communicate your expectations and your problems as well. So pretend that you are not talking as a teacher-student, you are talking as a person to person. So by talking this person to person, just tell that you also got these problems, and ask them for suggestions. What is good for them? What solution might they see? They might give you some good ideas. All right, the next principle we are moving to is supportive teaching practices. By supportive teaching practices, we mean some patience and compassion. Some students might have poor internet connection. Some might not be ready to discuss some things with you during the class. Do not make them do that. Be understanding. Then encourage students choosing their level of challenge. Of course, at the same time, some of them might feel frustrated about discussing some things. Then give them different tasks. Give them a task at a different level of challenge. Your point is to teach them speaking, reading, writing, and listening skills. So focus not on the expectations of the curriculum, but rather developing their language proficiency. Sometimes your lesson plans will not go as planned because there was something that triggered a majority of your group. And maybe discussing those things that they want to discuss is a good idea. The next supportive teaching practice is individualizing learning goals. Discuss it with your students. What are their expectations? What is your expectation, and how you can help your students in reaching their learning goals? Of course, it will take so much time for you to discuss it with every single student. Then try to group those students. Use other technology that might help you surveying them, and then identify their learning goals with them, and then knowing their expectations, communicating that with their parents might make you, first of all, and them after that feel less stressed about the curriculum and the workload. The next principle is sense of community. So double down on communication and outreach. I know that during the COVID lockdowns, you've been constantly checking in with your students, with parents, you've been on touch. While we have this wartime, we should double down on that communication and outreach, and it might be a helping hand for our students because they will feel that they are cared, there is a community they belong to, and everything is not that bad. I mean, they are not alone in that. So there are other people who care about them and who experience the same traumatic events, and just checking in with students and having this culture of emotional and social compassion will help our students. Also, in wartime, we need this piece of normality like we have now, like our usual yearly events. So your students also need some rituals and routines that were usual for your classrooms before the wartime. It might include some announcements, some kind of greeting you have with your students, or some other tradition that you had in your classrooms before these traumatic events. So this was the last principle, sense of community. And now, can you please write down how many principles do you want to implement in your classrooms right from the next class? Let me remind you, these are the 5 principles of trauma-informed teaching. Write down the number of principles you want to implement right from the next class. While you're writing your answers, we will proceed to techniques that might help you implement trauma-informed teaching. So The first technique is grounding. In psychology, grounding is switching your attention from something that is frustrating for you, that triggers unpleasant emotions, and up to things that are around you. So grounding technique is, for example, take a deep breath and name 5 objects around you. If you're online, this will be, for example, pen, laptop, keyboard, cell phone, and things like this. If you're in the brick and mortar classroom, you've already learned school objects with your students. So by grounding them in the moment and seeing what's around them, you switch their attention and you help them focus on other things different from those which trigger them. The next technique is contextualizing emotions. So ask your students how they feel. Ask them what color and symbol shows their emotion. If their vocabulary is beyond the level of answering this question, you can provide pictures and extra scaffolding for them to elicit their answers. The next technique is embodiment. Ask them how they feel and ask them to mime this emotion by movements, by pretending to be someone else and showing these emotions. They first learn how these emotions look at, how these emotions appear on other people's faces. And next, they have a look at their own body and how they show, for example, anger, frustration, fear, happiness. And then using different role plays is also helpful for your students. Role-playing dialogue, for example, or role-playing some skits will help your students feel less stressed, and also by moving their body, they will distract from those traumatic events and triggers. The next technique is working with fears. Discuss students' fears, anxiety, frustration. Have one box and put the slips of papers with names of those fears or pictures of those fears in the box and lock it out. So whenever a student feels triggered, anxious, and afraid, ask them to write down what they feel and put it into a box. And this is like visually getting rid of that emotion. And also admitting that they have this emotion and they are not alone in that, because some of the students might also have similar emotions they want to get rid of. In online and virtual environments, you can have some joint board where they write down their fears when they feel those. The next technique is empowerment. We talked about that before, but then again, it's very important to give your students a piece of responsibility, their zone of responsibility in your classroom, and assign classroom roles for your students, either online or offline. Discuss those roles with them. It will help them feel cared, cherished, and important for a group of people around them, and it will also help them understand that those bad things around them are not whole life. There's still this warmth and pleasant atmosphere, people who care about them all around them. So give them their zone of responsibility in your classroom, and then they will feel empowered. This was the last technique that I wanted to present to you. However, there are many, many more activities that you can implement being trauma-informed in your classrooms. You can email me and you can find me in social media, or you can also join my YouTube channel to find more information about these and other techniques you can implement. And if you have any questions, I'm really happy to answer those in the chat box. Thank you for your attention, and have a nice day.